Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Now there's reason why I put so much emphasis on left-wing sources. You know, it's one thing if right-wing outlets are reporting something, or even neutral outlets. It's another when left-wing sources do it. See, here's what's going on. These left-wing news sources operate in a world of fiction, a world of make-believe, a world of liberal fantasy and liberal narratives. And of course, the vote blue no matter who Twitter leftists, well, they exist in those fantasy lands. And everything else to them is propaganda. And so when a left-wing source actually reports on the truth, it's significant. You know, like with Joe Biden's failed Afghanistan withdrawal, the fact that CNN and various other news sources were actually going after Joe and reporting on the truth of his failures at the time, I mean, it was shocking, and it had serious effects on his approval ratings moving forward. A lot of people were being exposed to, well, reality for the first time. It's almost like pulling a leftist out of the matrix. You know, left-wing narratives get debunked all the time, but until left-wing sources actually report on it consistently and regularly, left-wingers don't know that it exists. And so this entire time they've been thinking, we're golden, the Dobbs issue is all that we needed, this election is in our hands, until that New York Times/Siena poll came out, which of course is from an extremely left-wing source, and it completely shattered their hopes, shattered their view, and the sheer panic, the desperation, the depression, well, it's a sight to behold. This isn't the first video that we make on this topic, so I'm sure you guys are already up on all the context. Democrats continue to panic, and here's a great example with ABC's The View. We've got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so just a glorious headline this morning. The View host, Joy Behar, quote, depressed over Republican midterm prospects. Joy Behar, one of the co-hosts of ABC's daytime show The View, is depressed. She is depressed because she does not comprehend how a threat to democracy is not the number one thing on people's minds this election, and she cannot comprehend how they would vote Republican. But the average person does not have a net worth of $30 million and an annual salary of $7 million, as Celebrity Net Worth reported. Take a look at this clip.
Yeah. So it's a whole, there's all kind of stuff going on. And so this is the world of debate now.
Well, what's depressing is that the New York Times released a poll today that says that 71% of voters agree that democracy is under threat.
Yeah.
But only 7% of voters rank a threat to democracy as a major issue this election cycle.
Yeah.
I find that so depressing. I can't begin to tell you.
That's why I don't like polls.
Well,
it is depressing.
you can debate the poll,
yeah,
but this is what people are saying.
Oh, the panic is really starting to settle in now, isn't it? How is it possible that our narrative is falling apart? Is essentially all that I'm hearing. How is it possible that people's number one issue on the ballot isn't January 6th insurrection? Well, very simply, as the conservative brief points out, because most people don't have a net worth of $30 million. When gas prices shoot up 100%, doubling in less than a year, when everything becomes more expensive, it may seem marginal to you, but to regular people it matters. I also find the bias comical. 70% of people asked within this poll state that they believe democracy is in peril. Yeah, well, if you could get your head out of your behind, you might realize that people have different opinions for different reasons. You know, there's people on both sides of the political spectrum that might have different views of why democracy might be under threat, and maybe not everyone under that 70% umbrella is worried about democracy because of January 6th insurrection. These people are so far gone, so out of touch with basic reality, it's not even funny. And that's why they're so shocked when they're hit with this kind of information. I mean, we've been reporting on it, we've been expecting it and predicting this exact political outcome. In other words, we're not exactly surprised, but all of these leftoids who have been living in their own little safe spaces and their own Twitter bubbles, the moment they get a little dose of reality, all of a sudden, everything starts to melt around them, the ceiling's falling down, the sky is falling, as they lose control of the narrative. And this New York Times Siena poll has just been absolutely incredible. We covered the cope and the meltdown that Nancy Pelosi was having, and of course the Twitter meltdown that Jen Psaki was experiencing, and now the ladies at The View are absolutely shocked. They're flabbergasted by the concept that regular Americans have the economy as their number one issue. You know, that very small, little, insignificant thing that we call the economy? How could that possibly be people's number one issue? I just don't see it, folks. I don't see how that could make any sense. It only makes sense to this elitist portion of the population generation that have completely lost their minds. People who over the last 6 years have convinced themselves that they're living in some sort of dystopian nightmare novel where there's enemies everywhere, secret Nazis hiding behind every door, around every corner, and under every rock, and every single thing keeps coming back to the same damn thing, the same endpoint of democracy and fascism and all this other nonsense. Actually, here's a great example from absolute lunatic Chris Hayes at MSNBC.
Oil companies, OPEC, Saudis, not exactly eager to make sure prices are low before an election where Democratic candidates are vulnerable. It's also why Saudi Arabia might want to suddenly announce a cut in oil production right before the midterms. Of course, Democrats can't just throw their hands up and say, oh, well, because the future of American democracy is in, as we report night in, night out on this program, real peril, existential peril. One of the two major parties is currently under the thrall of a guy who tried a violent coup unsuccessfully, but has basically announced he'd do it all over again. By one analysis, 60% of Americans will have an election denier on their ballot this November. The stakes in the upcoming elections are the highest they've been in a very long time. This is the first post-coup election in America. We cannot expect threats to democracy to be the only salient issue for voters, even if it is salient for a lot. I mean, there's millions of voters and people have complicated and busy lives and they've got things they're thinking about when they go to the polls, like the cost of living, inflation, and yes, gas prices, the one price in America that is posted on every street corner, those digits, they are going to be front of mind for voters. And so we find ourselves in a situation where keeping gas prices low is key to preserving and strengthening the future of our democracy. And so here we are. Hence Biden releasing oil from the reserves today.
Now, did you catch that one specific part?
The future of American democracy is in, as we report night in, night out on this program, real peril, existential peril. As we report night in, night out on this program.
As we've been reporting night in and night out, how our democracy is in legitimate peril, existential threat, then going on to justify Joe Biden's release of petroleum reserves, which are meant for serious emergencies only, even if it's just a cheap political ploy, because artificially fixing gas prices for the current administration's political electoral gain is justified because of democracy. I mean, we're talking about people that are living in an alternate reality. These elitist leftists and of course the Vote Blue No Matter Who Twitter liberals who watch them are living in some sort of fabricated delusional fantasy or dystopia, whatever the hell you want to call it, and it makes them completely blind to the real world. When you spend all of your time on Twitter and none of your time in the real world talking to real people and understanding what real people are going through, well, this is what it looks like. Meanwhile, in the real world, the top issues continue to be the economy, inflation, affordability, crime, the southern border, foreign policy, pretty much everything but abortion and January 6th insurrection, and whatever the next left-wing DNC media fear-mongering operation it might be. TLDR, leftists, shocked, surprised by basic truths and reality. Democrats shocked to realize that they're living in a bubble and everything they believe is fake news. In other words, just another Wednesday, just another day, but I have to admit, it's absolutely fascinating, totally entertaining to see these leftoids step out of their little Twitter bubble and the shock on their face when being exposed to how regular, real people feel and live. We don't call them elitist liberals for nothing. That's what I got for you guys though. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel if you guys are up for it. I'm gonna get back to work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.